that dark and lonely road. Let us.
Well, I'm going to pause that song and continue with our discussion. And the discussion dealt with the idea of Hawaiian nationalism and how hopeful should we be that there will be changes as a result of this resolution, at least going through the Hawaii State Legislature. And this is a resolution, it's resolution number 68 and House Concurrent Resolution number 96. So House Resolution 68 and House Concurrent Resolution 96. It's passed the Committee on Hawaiian Affairs, and so it'll go to other committees within the state legislature. Some people remain disappointed with the fact that we operate under a colonial system, and I recognize that fact. I am heartened by the fact that the resolution was introduced. It's a sign of hopefulness that we can begin to make changes in the way we are being treated. If the resolution does not pass, or had it not been introduced, we would still remain in the same condition with regards to the colonial operation of the state of Hawaii to us. Now at least there is some hope, and I'm not suggesting that we place all our bets on this hope, but it engages the discussion, and we need to simply continue to fight against the injustices that we have to maintain our to secure our Hawaiian nation. So we cannot give up the struggle. The other thing, and I was asked about it by the chairperson of the committee about the Native Hawaiian Convention and how did we address the issue of Hawaiian nationality at the Native Hawaiian Convention. And what I did was I pointed out the convention itself limited the number of people who could participate in the convention just by the financing that the state legislature had put into the convention and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, was that they limited it only to the indigenous people of Hawaii. And that was a limitation that we had to work with. But taking that limitation, this is what we did as a result of the setting up of the election of in the convention, the election of delegates to the convention, and then how we proceeded after that. First of all, we said, okay, we recognize this limitation. Now let's see how wide we can open it up to. So what we said was that you need to show that you are a descendant of the native people of Hawaii. The law requires that. But within that, the law did not require that you be a U.S. citizen. You can claim citizenship from wherever you want. You can claim that you remain a Hawaiian national. We will allow you to vote. Quite the contrary to what state elections require, including the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So we said, no, we are not going to follow that practice. You can be, or you may have traveled or gone and lived in a different place, whether it's in California, in Washington, D.C., or in France, or in Zimbabwe, or in China. Irrespective of your citizenship or your place of residence, we will allow you to vote. We also said that even if the courts have somehow said we are removing your civil rights as a result of any criminal offense they found that you may have committed, what we are saying is whether you're in jail, you're out of jail, irrespective of your civil condition, we're allowing you to vote. So what we did was we expanded the participatory nature of this election to include people of any nationality, as long as they had that blood relationship. What we did inside of the convention was something else again. In the creation of this proposal for an independent nation, we recognized what this resolution was recognizing, that the change of an individual's nationality is really an individual decision, and we recognize that there are no historical markers by which the Hawaiian national went along with, conceded to the change of their nationality. Therefore, it was a violation of the principles of international law as well as of Hawaiian law to simply take a person and say, from now on, you're sort of like a ceded human being, just like the ceded lands. They just claimed that they had the right to it, they owned it, and they were going to give it to the United States, cede it to the United States. That's the same thing that they did to the Hawaiian national, to that human being. Although we don't refer to people as ceded, that's exactly what we are, the ceded human being, the ceded national. So what we are saying is we are reclaiming our nationality. We are saying, no, we're not going along with that foolishness. And I recounted some of the historical events that occurred that allowed for this to happen. And Pilipo Souza, one of our callers often, and usually he calls in the morning, was also testifying, and he added to that historical events. On the 4th of July, 1894, Sanford Dole descended the steps of Iolani Palace, came down to the halfway point, and at that point they had a ceremony in which Sanford Dole declared that a new constitution that came out of the convention that was recently concluded. Now, this convention consisted of delegates who had been elected by the people. But before you could run for these delegation positions and before you could vote in this election, you had to sign a pledge that you disavowed any loyalty to Queen Liliuokalani and you avowed your loyalty to the provisional government. The majority of those in this convention were appointed by Sanford Dole. The minority were elected. So you can see how this convention was a setup by the provisional government. So when it came out with a constitutional document, Sanford Dole on the 4th of July declared that this is the new constitution for the Republic of Hawaii. In that declaration or a proclamation, no one was allowed to vote to ratify the Constitution. The Hawaiian people were kept away from consenting to it or rejecting it. No vote taken. Within that Constitution, what it said was, all of the lands that belongs to the government and the crown of Hawaii are hereby government lands. All of the waters that belong to the government of the Hawaiian nation or to the crown are hereby lands and waters of the Republic of Hawaii. And then what it said is that all of the citizens of the Hawaiian nation are hereby declared to be automatically citizens of the Republic of Hawaii, thus switching their nationality from the Hawaiian nation to the Republic of Hawaii without the consent of the Hawaiian nationals. Now, they held on to power until 1897, when they were able to negotiate a treaty of annexation with the United States, because the first treaty was rejected by President Cleveland. So the order of things was that Harrison signed the treaty, sent it to the Senate. When Cleveland got in, he did his own investigation, found out what had happened, and said that he would not be supporting the treaty's movement into the Senate for its approval. And then they had to wait 4 years. Now, after that, meantime, they changed the clothing of Hawaii from merely a provisional government, now a Republic of Hawaii with a constitution, then submitted a new treaty to a new president, and that was McKinley. So William McKinley signed the treaty, sent it to the Senate to have it ratified. The Senate could not get the ratification vote, and so they had to circumvent the constitutional requirement requiring the Senate to ratify by 2/3 of those present in the Senate. And so they went by joint resolution of Congress. That's where Representative Newlin introduced the joint resolution, and so the so-called Treaty of Annexation was ratified by a joint resolution in violation of course, the Constitution of the United States. But in that process, the treaty was supposedly a cession of the lands of Hawaii and a cession of its citizens to become U.S. citizens. The ratification, or the so-called ratification, then pulled the Hawaiian nationals into the United States. The Organic Act came about in 1900 to organize a territory of Hawaii, and so we were all recognized as citizens of the United States within the territory of Hawaii. And then in 1959, during statehood, then you were citizens of the state of Hawaii and remained citizens of the United States. So these are the markers. Not one of these markers were legitimate because it all was based on the initial act of the declaration made on the 4th of July, 1894. So what the Native Hawaiian Convention has been saying is that in the proposal for an independent nation, we'll recognize that there are essentially two major groupings. One consists of the Hawaiian nationals of any race, who are nationals because of their allegiance, their meeting certain national requirements. And so that will form the general body of the Hawaiian nation. The other group will be the Native Hawaiians of any blood quantum, very similar to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. But the powers that this, what we call a Kumu Hawaii, would have would be far more than what the Office of Hawaiian Affairs has. They would, for example, be the sort of the landlord of all of the so-called ceded lands. The government and crown lands would go into this estate, and this Kumu Hawaii would manage these lands and many other requirements within the formulation for an independent nation. Now, I'm not saying that the Native Hawaiian Convention came out and supported only an independent nation, because what it really did was support both an independent model for self-determination as well as propose an integrationist model for self-determination, the choice of being integrated within the United States. But what it hasn't really stated it yet, but the options available is that you can support independence, or you can support integration, or you can support both independence as well as integration. So unlike the way the Akaka bill has been promoted by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs or others, and I think it's a inappropriate promotion because it's people who really don't understand what could be available. It is the use of the wrong conjunction as one talks about the Akaka bill. Either you support an integrationist approach or you support independence. And by that framing of the question, it places a person in contradiction with one position or the other position, either this or that. And then you get this fight among Hawaiians. Well, you're against independence and you support the Akaka bill, and you're a sellout and you want only the benefits here and there, but you don't look at the long run or the long-term availability of independence, complete independence for us. Other people are saying, no, I want to protect the Hawaiian homes. I want to protect the Kamehameha schools. I don't want any more of these lawsuits. I want this, this, and that. It's a debate which is totally unnecessary, because the positioning of these questions is not with a conjunction or. The appropriate conjunction is a conjunction and. You can go ahead and support the Akaka bill. You can go ahead and support integration, but it is not the final act. You still retain the right for independence. You still retain the right to claim, I am a Hawaiian national. You shouldn't pit one Hawaiian against another. You shouldn't pit one Hawaiian against himself. Many people who live on the Hawaiian homestead lands wants to preserve that homestead for the native Hawaiians, but they also support independence. So why is it that we have termed this question in such a confrontational, adversarial, and one against the other term? And that we too need to mature to understand that we have the right to self-determination, which extends over the whole gamut and not be forced into these kinds of choices. And we shouldn't participate in setting it up so that you have to choose one or the other. Okay. So this was part of the discussion that we had at the committee, and very favorably received, with respect, with an understanding of, I guess, the depth of the analysis of these issues, and that the proponents of this resolution are not simply fly-by-night, not understanding our history or international law or the appropriate management of putting together these things. It was very interesting that the chairperson also inquired where is the Native Hawaiian Convention at the present time, and with an indication that there was some concern about perhaps moving it along so that we can accomplish our work as we obligated ourselves to, and the state actually obligated itself to support it when it held the Native Hawaiian vote. Okay, enough of that. We do have a caller. Our telephone number here is 524-1080, and give me a call if you would like to join in our discussion. Let's go to our caller. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Mr. Lainui,
yes.
I just realized something. Our congressional officials should somehow work through the immigration system so that when people come to Hawaii, the caller before me mentioned about people who come to Hawaii and don't appreciate the aloha spirit, Hawaiiana. If somehow in the immigration office or organization who teach Hawaiiana can teach these new citizens, even though it's America, more about Hawaiiana and the aloha spirit, it would create a circle of influence for the Hawaiians and for the local people, the Kamainas and the Malihinis, to as a momentum, as a mobilizing force for the establishment of the Hawaiian Kingdom. You think the congressional representative and senators could maybe look into the immigration office and see how they can strengthen Hawaiiana or the aloha spirit even more? Because the caller before me mentioned that a lot of the people who come to Hawaii and who left because they didn't have the aloha spirit that exists now as it was in the past, to strengthen the momentum for Hawaiiana.
My answer to your question is very unlikely, and let me tell you why. The transmigration of people to the United States, whether they consider it in Hawaii or any other place, is standardized. It follows what one can call a national norm. So what they do is they go through a process of essentially brainwashing to make them, or what they call acculturate them to be Americans. And so they follow the American concept as it comes from, those people who wrote the book on American history. So they are not going to take a chapter and teach specifically about Hawaii, because when people come, they are studying from that standard approach. So they can be naturalized in New York City, in San Francisco, or in Texas, or in Hawaii. And so they follow that that common approach. What I think is really happening, and when people come to Hawaii, they're coming when they have no familiarity with the history of Hawaii. They're coming not to Hawaii, they're coming to the United States, and by coincidence, the United States also has Hawaii under its control. And this is the mentality that they come to Hawaii with. It's our responsibility. It's the responsibility of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. It's a responsibility, I think, of the state of Hawaii, of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, that we need to see whether they come as tourists or they come as new citizens to Hawaii, that there must be a campaign within Hawaii to start changing these people's understanding of Hawaii and begin teaching them about the history of Hawaii. Earlier I talked about the code of conduct for what did I call them? For settlers to Hawaii, and there are certain obligations. Later on, we can talk about those detailed things. But let's just take the tourist industry. I think the tourist industry has failed its moral obligation to inform the tourists and then see every tourist as an ambassador for Hawaii. Instead, they have treated the tourists very cheaply. Not all of them, but oftentimes very cheaply, in simply catering to the demands of the tourists to be fed, be clothed, be entertained, and then shipping them out. And part of the reason for that is that they are not dedicated to Hawaii, they are dedicated to the corporations. So within tourism, you have what we call the tourist bubble. Now, you have this interesting Japanese tourist bubble. You have an interesting German tourist bubble. You have other tourist bubble that floats around in Hawaii. We don't see it because we only see tour buses, but they are actually tour bubbles. So you have, let's say, in the Japanese tourist bubble, a man in Tokyo or any other city in Japan goes to the beginning of the bubble, and that is a travel agency within Japan. They sign the person up and they assign the person to another aspect of the bubble, which is Japan Airlines or another airlines that they've already purchased maybe 100 seats. They fly them to Hawaii, and there in Hawaii they get the Japan-controlled tourist industry here in Hawaii. Either the transportation is done by Japanese corporations, the greeters are Japanese greeters, and then they take them to Japanese hotels. When they're in Japanese hotels, they sign them up for Japanese golf courses or Japanese restaurants or Japanese entertainment facilities. And then when they are done, they go back on Japanese buses, back to Japanese hotels, and from there back to Japanese airlines, and then back to Japan. Oh, what a wonderful Hawaiian experience we had. It's not a Hawaiian experience, it's a Japanese, and that is how the bubble is controlled.
But the Hawaii Tourism Authority have to work with them then, the hotels.
And all they do is they take very small amounts of the excess. So we collect a percentage of the taxes. But really getting in and influence the Japanese and educating them and being a part of that business, no. They have corralled the industry. It's the same with the Germans. And it's the same with many others. And that is how a lot of that tourist business is conducted. Now,
so, Mr. Kalan, Mr. Laino, can I ask you this question?
Okay.
Should we go by universal principles of indigenous cultures in the sense of that it's more than just money and enjoyment of entertainment and pleasures in Hawaii by other races? There has to be a mantra somehow stated about Hawaii, and when they leave, that same mantra about Hawaii is kept in their mind, yet it has integrity to the Hawaiian culture, and yet it empathize with the other cultures who come to the island, who leave the islands.
Yeah, I think you're exactly on point. So if you just look at the term, the tourist industry, And so what you do is you handle human beings as industrial items, and following the industrial, very mechanistic approach to an industry. Even that needs to be changed, and the whole view of tourism. We need to see tourism as a human relationship, essentially a human relationship, as instead of merely an industry representing money. And when we start seeing them as human beings, then we begin to educate, communicate, relate to them as that, and only then can we turn them around so that they become ambassadors for Hawaii,
So
rather
then,
than just entertainment spots.
So, Mr. Lainui, then we have to go to the International Tourist Authority and start from there, because it has to educate the whole culture of tourism as to the approach, the principles,
Yeah, I don't.
so that it's international, so that it's not only in Hawaii, so that all the tourists have this right perspective, objective perspective,
Yeah.
when they visit other countries.
Yeah, I think the perspectives should change. I don't know if there is such an international arm for tourism, but Hawaii itself can begin to make that change. I haven't seen that change begin. I know, who was that? George Kanahele had been trying to do it in his book, Kukanaka. Who was that? Kenny Brown has been trying to make that changes, but it hasn't really caught on, not as far as I am aware, to the extent that it should be done. You know, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for calling.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'aku me ke one o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Po'ohui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e minamina, I ka pu'ukala o ke aupuni, Ua lava mai